Monday, February 3rd, 2020, Maneco 64, home of alternative economics and contrarian views. So with the UK out of the EU, I know Britain's still negotiating with the EU a trade deal. It could go on until the end of the year. It might not even happen, and we could have a hard Brexit. I want to talk about how I think the UK will fare in the long term out of the EU. So I'll be looking at 3 points in this video that I think are going to be important with Brexit going forward for the UK economy and for the UK public in general. The first one is going to be how the economy will do in the long term, in my opinion. Second one, how the pounds or the currency that we use in the UK will fare over the long term. And third is related to the second, as I don't think the pound will do well. I'm going to talk about how I plan to protect myself. You might want to do that as well. I'm not advising you, and I'll tell you what I plan to do and how I plan to do it as well. So yes, there are some headlines today about how these negotiations aren't going very well between Prime Minister Johnson and the EU. It says that the pound has been hit hard, and it has today. The pound is down 1.5% almost against the dollar. But I think there's a lot more to it than just short-term noise about the pounds, and I'll come to that now. So first point, how I think the economy will do in the long term in the UK. I actually think in all, it's a good thing to leave the EU. Why? Well, there's one less layer of government, Brussels. It's always better for economies and the free market to have one less layer of government. Of course, we still have to see if that layer of government is going to be really peeled away from the domestic economy in the UK. It's still far too early to know how much the interference and the rules that impact our economy from the EU are going to be whittled away, how quickly they are going to be whittled away. But I think longer term, it's always a good thing. So that's a positive. The other one, and it's to do with one less layer of government as well, but it's less regulations. The less regulations there are, the better for the economy. Some people might argue, well, you need to protect people with regulations. But I think the market does a good job. I think if people act in a bad way, the consumers, they're gonna walk away from people like that. Yes, you do need some regulation, but not overbearing regulation. And I think that is going to be longer term. That's going to be one of the major benefits of leaving the EU. The European bureaucrats are known to want to regulate everything. There are some negative points going forward for the economy still. They probably won't be as bad because we'll have one less layer of government. But unfortunately, I think government spending is going to continue to increase. And we've seen already in January, the Johnson government increased borrowing by 14 billion. So they're going to keep running deficits, especially with the Americans running deficits. We've seen India running deficits now as well. China, of course, is going to run deficits. Even the Germans are talking about increasing deficit. And I think that's not a good thing. That crowds out the private sector. So that's a thing that is not very positive for me. And that means that the debt is going to keep increasing. And it's normal, and I'm not surprised. And that's why I think people need to keep that in mind. Not be too over-optimistic just because we are out of the EU that everything's going to be great, because I don't think it will in terms of the debt. mainly because we have a monetary system that is run by debt. And by that I mean the money is debt. It's the flip side of the debt is the currency. And we haven't had, of course, a sound money system where money is gold or commodity money, where it's not a liability since the early 1900s here in the UK. So that's not a positive. And I'll come to number two in a minute. And you'll see how that debt and deficit spending is going to impact on the currency that you use for everyday transactions, for savings as well. But before I finish, last point of how the economy will do in the longer term, I think that being unshackled from the EU will give the UK more freedom to trade and compete on the global scale, and that can only be a good thing. So that's how I see the economy. It will be better, in my opinion, out of the EU, even though there are still some points that are going to weigh on it. Number two, how the pound will fare. I think one important thing we need to understand is that since World War II, the policy of the UK establishment or government, be it left or right, has been to write off the debt. How do you write off the debt? Well, by inflating it away, by debasing the currency, by creating even more debt, so you can make the debt become worth less. And what do you inflate that currency away against? Well, in the post-World War period, it was against the dollar until 1968. The pound was at 4.03 to the dollar in 1940. They devalued to 2.80 by 30% in 1949. And don't forget, at that time, the dollar was fixed to gold at $35 an ounce. So they had to devalue against the dollar. So 1949 devalued from 403 to 280. And then in 1967 devalued by another 14% from 280 to 240. And then as well, the dollar kind of lost its anchor against gold. I know Nixon closed the gold window in 78, but the dollar really lost its anchor in 1968 in April of that year, and so did the pound. And why is gold so important? Well, because it's been the most stable store of value, the most stable or the best yardstick of value for thousands of years. Gold keeps its purchasing power. It's a stable store of value. And that's why central banks still have thousands of tons of it. So I'll show you here a chart of gold in British pounds since 1968. You can see that it was trading around 17 pounds, and now we're at 1200. Yes, the pound is going down also against the dollar, but it's gone down more so against gold. And that's how they've made the debt more carryable, I guess. The debt burden has been easier to carry with the pound being worth less. And how does that work? Well, that means your foreign earnings in real things become worth more in this country, so we can pay off debt that is worth less, and that's how it works. If you look at this chart here of the national debt at the top, just before the end of World War II, see how it came down in the 50s and 60s. That didn't come down because they paid it off penny per penny. It came off as a percentage of GDP because they debased the currency. So the currency was worth less, the foreign earnings and the GDP became worth more, and that's why the debt level fell. And I don't expect that to change. So that's why I expect further debasement of the pound, especially against gold. And why especially against gold? Well, because all the other fiat currencies and the dollar that's supposed to be the reserve currency, we're all floating against gold. We're all under a fiat currency system. The Americans are still doing a lot of deficit spending. So yeah, the pound is not going to devalue as much as it used to against the dollar, but it will do it against gold. And that's why I think we're going to keep seeing more and more inflation of the system so that we can make the debt more less of a burden. Because basically debt is consuming today what you're going to consume tomorrow. And the more debt you have, the harder it's a tax on future production and consumption. But if you make that debt worth less, then it becomes easier. One example is if you bought a house in 1970 for £5,000 and you had a £2,500 mortgage and you still have that house, you're a pensioner and it's worth 700,000 or a million. That 2,500 mortgage is like it's nothing these days. So that's how countries do it on a big scale. They inflate it away against real things, and the ultimate measure of real things is gold. So now to the final point, point number 3. How do I plan to protect myself from the policy of debasement of the pound, knowing that the only way to write off the debt without bringing the economy to a screeching halt is for politicians and the central bankers to keep printing and inflating and spending. Well, that's going to be by staying the course. And what do I mean by staying the course? Well, I've been trying to accumulate as much gold and silver as possible since 2002 because I knew it back then that this was the policy and it's only going to get worse. So that's how I plan to do it. It's getting harder and harder. Why? I would say because the pound, the fiat pound is continuing to lose value versus this, a gold sovereign. I don't think it's the price of the sovereign that is going up because do you see people queuing up to buy gold at the moment? No. So the demand isn't that great. So why is the price going up? Well, because it's not really going up because it's the value of the currency that's going down. It's being inflated away. There's no anchor to the fiat currency. Under the gold standard that was in effect from 1717 to 1914, you could always get a pound for this. Yes, it wasn't the Bank of England and the British banks didn't keep 100% gold reserves. I think historically the average was a third. So if they issued 3 pounds in credit or banknotes, they always had 1 pound of gold. But that kept the system fairly honest, that gold backing. But now we don't have that. Banks don't even hold gold anymore as reserves. The Bank of England holds only 300 tons for the UK, and they keep increasing credit and the fiat currency. And that's why the fiat currency keeps going down against gold. So just to give you an example, back in 2002, I remember actually exchanging fiat currency or fiat pounds or pounds if you want to call it for one of these, a sovereign, for £50. So I had to pay £50 for one of these back then. And now you need about 300 to get one of these. So as I said, it's the value of the currency that's dropping. This coin hasn't changed. It's still the same. It's the money that's gone bad. So that's what I plan to do. Try to accumulate more and more of these. Why? Well, that's the way I keep my savings protected against inflation. Of course, savings are important. Are for a rainy day. You hope that you don't have to touch your savings. and that you can eventually leave it to your children, of course. Many of you have asked me in the last few years, because I've spoken about gold many times. It's one of the subjects that I cover in most of my videos, because that's what I look at, the monetary system, the central banking system. And a lot of you have asked me, where can I get gold? Well, today, for example, I went into town, I had a walk, and one of the local jewelers was selling some gold coins, as you can see here. Very nice coins. So some jewelers do sell gold. What you need to do, though, is check on the internet what the bullion dealers are charging for coins, to make sure that the jewelers are not overcharging. Usually jewelers charge a lot more than the bullion dealers, but you can have a look. So where do I get my gold? Where have I gotten my gold in the last 18 years? Well, different places. I started out with a jeweler in the city of London. Unfortunately, they've gone out of business, or Mr. Haynes retired. And I've also dealt with gold investments. I've been dealing with them for about 18 years as well. And if any of you are interested in exchanging your fiat currency or accumulating gold, give them a call. They've been in business for over 50 years as individuals. Gold Investments has been around since 1981. It's a family-run business. And if you mention Maneco 64, if you talk to them on the phone, or if you go online, you can use Maneco 64 promo code. You get a 0.5% discount on the offer price. Am I advising you to buy gold? No. It's just that some of you might wonder, where can I get gold? And you don't have to go to Gold Investments. Do your homework. Check out the other dealers online. But Gold Investments prices are very competitive. They can also help you with other things related to gold, like storage or even your SIP. So there you go. To conclude then, I think it's good that UK left the EU. Of course, we still have 11 months to sort things out with the EU in terms of a trade deal. But I think in the longer term, the economy will continue to do well, but our currency is going to continue to devalue, as I told you, because of all the debt, just like all the other currencies around. So it's not something to do with Brexit, really. And third, I will continue to try to protect my savings if I can. If the pound doesn't lose too much value against precious metals, I will try to keep accumulating the precious metals, gold and silver as well. So if you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit the like button, share it far and wide, subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. You can also follow me on Twitter, Facebook, Steemit, BitChute, and DTube. I wish you all a great day. Take care. Bye.